Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories. My name is Rob, and this is the long-awaited finale of my sci-fi original thriller story, Astral. If you've been here for the first 7 parts, then I know that you are very excited to see the conclusion of what has been a very exciting journey. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 7, definitely, I know it sounds like a lot, but I would definitely recommend checking that out before getting into Chapter 8, because again, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. But if you've been here from the beginning, I want to absolutely thank you guys so much for being a part of what has been my best story I've released so far. I don't want to spend too much time doing an intro because it is a very long chapter, so let's go ahead and not waste another second. Let's get into it. This is the finale of Astral.
Callum stirred, his body tense as the vivid memory of flames and chains lingered in his mind. The faint morning light filtered through his curtains, but another presence jolted him fully awake. Callum, wake up! Reese's voice was frantic, and Callum felt hands shaking him urgently. His eyes snapped open, meeting Reese's pale, worried face hovering over him. "Reese?" Callum croaked, his voice raw from the strain of the night's events. "Oh, thank God," Reese said, his shoulders sagging with relief. I couldn't wake you up. You weren't moving, and I thought—" He broke off, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Callum pushed himself upright, his body trembling. "Reese, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't sleep," Reese said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "After what we talked about yesterday, I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't. I was too scared of what might happen. And then, when I finally fell asleep, I couldn't find you." He swallowed hard, his face pale. "I freaked out, okay? I thought something had happened, so I came here to check on you." Callum stared at him, still trying to process everything. "You couldn't sleep?" Reese nodded, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Yeah. Big surprise, right? I'm not exactly the poster boy for bravery." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding Callum's gaze. "I'm more brains than ability, and even then my abilities are— Let's just say I'm no Talon. If it ever came down to a fight, I wouldn't stand a chance. Anxiety's kinda my thing, you know?" Callum's heart ached at the sight of his friend's vulnerability, but a realization struck him. "You couldn't find me?" Reese shook his head. "It was like you weren't there. What happened?" Callum's throat tightened, and he took a deep breath. "Reese, Eldrin's dead." The color drained from Reese's face. "What?" "Talon killed him," Callum said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The sanctum is gone. He destroyed it. The society. It's over." Reese staggered back, his hands gripping the edge of Callum's bed for support. "Eldrin was— He was everything," Callum said, his chest tightening with grief. "And now he's gone." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of the loss pressing down on them like a physical force. "But that's not all," Callum continued, his voice trembling. "Talon's formed a group, the Abyssal Dominion. He's recruited everyone else. It's just us now." Reese's hands tightened into fists, his knuckles white. "What do we do?" Callum hesitated, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to meet, talk this through, and figure out our next move." Reese nodded, though his face was still pale. "Where?" "The Copper Hearth Bistro," Callum said. "Noon." "Okay," Reese said, his voice unsteady. He glanced toward the window, the faint light of dawn beginning to creep into the room. "We'll figure this out, Callum. We have to." Callum nodded, though his chest felt hollow. "Yeah, we will." As Reese left, Callum lay back down, staring at the ceiling. The events of the night replayed in his mind, vivid and relentless. Eldrin was gone. The sanctum was gone. And the shadow of Talon's dominion loomed larger than ever. But for now, he had to focus on tomorrow. Callum lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear, grief, and uncertainty. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames consuming the sanctum, Eldrin's lifeless body sprawled on the floor, and Talon's piercing red eyes behind that mask. By the time the first rays of sunlight broke through his window, Callum hadn't slept a second. He rose with a heavy heart, moving through his morning routine on autopilot. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. What do I do now? How do I stop Talon? Can I even stop him? No answers came. He hoped Rhys would have some idea of what to do. Callum wasn't a strategist, wasn't someone who could see the bigger picture. But Rhys, despite his anxiety, was smart. He'd always been more about the brain than the brawn. Yet, no matter how much he tried to focus on their next move, something else kept gnawing at him, a faint unease he couldn't shake. When noon finally came, Callum made his way to Copper Hearth Bistro. The restaurant was modest but cozy, with warm wooden accents and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. As soon as he stepped inside, his eyes landed on Rhys, who was sitting in a corner booth near the back. Callum almost laughed out loud. Rhys was wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap pulled low over his face, and a jacket with the hood up. He looked like someone trying and failing to be inconspicuous. Callum slid into the booth across from him, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" Rhys lowered the sunglasses slightly, his anxious eyes darting around the room. "Staying off the radar," he whispered. "You know, in case Talon sent someone after us." Callum sighed, resting his elbows on the table. "You look ridiculous." "Yeah, well," Rhys said, leaning forward. "Better ridiculous than dead." Callum let out a short laugh despite himself, but his expression quickly turned serious. "By the way, how did you even get into my apartment last night?" Rhys froze, the tips of his ears turning red. Yeah, about that." "Rhys," Callum said, narrowing his eyes. "How?" Rhys scratched the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "I told you I'm more of a brainiac than a projector, right?" "Yeah?" "Well," Rhys said, sitting up straighter and lowering his voice. I tracked your location, using your phone." Callum blinked. "You what?" Rhys held up his hands defensively. Okay, don't freak out. It's not that creepy. I just, used a signal triangulation method I developed for fun a couple of years ago. You know, for emergencies. I figured it'd be useful if I ever lost my phone or needed to find someone." Callum stared at him, half impressed and half concerned. "That's not normal," Rhys shrugged. "What can I say? I tinker. It's not like I stalk people or anything. Just, you seemed like you might be in trouble, and I panicked." "And the door?" Callum asked, crossing his arms. "How'd you open it?" "Oh, that?" Rhys said, a small grin forming on his face. "I used this prototype device I made. It's kind of like a universal key for non-electronic locks. Took me months to get it right, but..." Callum's eyes widened. "You made a device that opens any door?" Rhys held up a hand, his grin turning sheepish. "I'm kidding. You left your door unlocked. But the tracking thing? That part's true." Callum groaned, covering his face with his hands. Unbelievable. The laughter between them faded as Callum's thoughts shifted back to the weight of the situation. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, and lowered his voice. "Rhys," he began, his tone serious. "There's something you need to know. Talon and the Abyssal Dominion, they're not going to just sit back and let us live our lives. They're coming for us, and it's only a matter of time." Rhys froze, his already pale complexion growing even paler. His hands gripped the edge of the table, and his breathing quickened. "Coming for us? What do you mean? Why? We didn't even do anything." Callum shook his head. "It doesn't matter. We're not with them, and that makes us a threat, especially after last night." Rhys's chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes darting around the room as if he expected Talon to walk through the door at any moment. I can't handle this. I'm not built for this, Callum. I'm not you. Reese, Callum said firmly, reaching across the table to grab his friend's arm. Look at me. Reese's frantic gaze met his, tears welling up in his eyes. Breathe, Callum said, his voice steady. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Come on. Reese hesitated, but followed Callum's lead, his breath slowing as he focused on the rhythm. That's it, Callum said, giving him an encouraging nod. I know this is a lot, but I need you to stay with me. You're smart, Reese. You've got a brain that could put half of the society to shame. I can't do this without you. Reese swallowed hard, his breathing evening out. I don't know if I'm cut out for this, Callum, but I'll try. That's all I need, Callum said with a small smile. Reese nodded, wiping at his eyes. Okay, so I did some research this morning. I think I found a place we can go, somewhere safe. Callum tilted his head. Where? Mount Shasta, Reese said, his voice steadying as he spoke. It's in California. It's not just some random mountain, it's a hotspot for spiritual energy, a convergence point for, well, call it whatever you want. Ley lines, natural energy, even ancient astral forces. It's been talked about for centuries as a place of power. Callum leaned in, intrigued. Go on. It's not just the energy, Reese continued. The way it's positioned, the electromagnetic field surrounding the area, it makes it nearly impossible to track anyone who's projecting or using abilities tied to astral energy. Think of it like a natural cloaking device. The Abyssal Dominion wouldn't be able to find us there. And you're sure about this? Callum asked. Reese nodded. I double-checked everything I could find. It's not just a safe haven. It's a place where we could grow stronger, hone our abilities. The energy there could amplify what we're capable of. Callum sat back, processing the information. It was a long shot, but it was the best lead they had. Then we go. Reese blinked. What? Just like that? Callum nodded. We leave Nashville tomorrow morning. There's nothing left for us here, and we can't wait around for Talon to come after us. Mount Shasta is our best chance. Reese hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, how are we getting there? We'll take a bus, Callum said. It's the least conspicuous way to travel. No one's going to be looking for two guys taking a Greyhound. Fair enough, Reese said with a nervous laugh. Callum stood, throwing some cash onto the table for their meal. Go home and pack. Bring everything you can't live without. Reese followed suit, fidgeting with the strap of his bag. What do I pack? Callum met his gaze, his expression grim. Pack like you're leaving for good. The weight of the words settled between them, and Reese nodded silently. They stepped out of the restaurant into the bustling streets of Nashville, the sunlight almost too bright against the heaviness of the moment. Tomorrow, their journey would begin. Callum wandered the streets of Nashville, his heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. He passed familiar landmarks, the bustling bars of Broadway, the neon lights of honky-tonks, and the steady hum of voices that filled the air. The city had always been his home, a place where he had built a life, however unremarkable it might have seemed. But now, it felt like a distant memory, a world he could no longer be part of. He paused by the Cumberland River, leaning on the railing as he watched the water flow beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. The sound of the river was soothing, a constant in a life that was suddenly anything but. This could be the last time I see this, Callum murmured to himself. The thought hit him harder than he expected. He took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, and forced himself to keep walking. The city was alive, vibrant as ever, but Callum felt like a ghost, slipping through the crowd unnoticed. He wanted to hold on to these moments, to savor every sight and sound of a place he might never return to. When nightfall came, Callum made his way back to his apartment. The quiet of his space felt heavier than usual, the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards amplifying the stillness. He filled a glass of water from the sink, taking a long sip as he surveyed his belongings. There wasn't much to pack, just the essentials. A backpack sat open on his bed, half filled with clothes, a few books, and other necessities. Callum moved methodically, folding shirts and rolling up pairs of jeans, all while his mind raced. This is it. No turning back. He reached for his glass of water again, taking another sip as he placed his phone charger and a notebook into the bag. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though he were trying to stretch out the time he had left in this life. By the time the backpack was nearly full, Callum felt a strange heaviness creeping over him. His eyelids drooped, and a wave of exhaustion washed over him so suddenly that he had to steady himself against the bedpost. "What the?" he muttered, shaking his head in an attempt to clear it. His eyes flicked to the nightstand, where a small, empty bottle sat next to his glass of water. The label on the bottle read, "Melatonin." Callum's heart sank. He hadn't taken the pills, he'd been too focused on packing to even think about it. Yet the bottle was empty. His gaze snapped to the glass in his hand, realization dawning on him too late. Someone had drugged him. The room spun, his legs giving out beneath him as he stumbled forward. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor, but the sound barely registered in his foggy mind. Callum's body hit the floor with a dull thud, and the last thing he saw before everything went dark was the faint shimmer of moonlight spilling through the window. Callum's projection manifested in the familiar wooden chair, the room around him bathed in its usual silvery glow. For a moment, he sat there in confusion, his mind still clouded from the sudden exhaustion that had overtaken him. Looking down, he saw his physical body sprawled on the floor of his apartment. His heart raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The water, the melatonin. Someone drugged me. He stood, the chair creaking slightly behind him, and took a hesitant step forward. The sight of his unconscious form sent a chill down his spine. "What is going on?" he murmured. Before he could process it further, a rush of movement filled the room. Shadows converged from all sides, and in an instant, the Abyssal dominion surrounded him. The familiar faces of the former society members stared back at him, their expressions cold and unyielding. Callum's fists clenched, his mind racing for a way out. But before he could act, Talon and Vexa entered. Talon's presence was suffocating, his dark mask gleaming faintly in the ethereal light. His red eyes glowed like embers, and his long black cloak swept behind him as he strode into the room with Vexa by his side. Vexa's emerald eyes locked onto Callum, her expression unreadable, but her steps purposeful. She moved with a grace that made her seem untouchable, her confidence only adding to the tension in the room. "Well, well," Talon said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Look who's all alone." Callum's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stand his ground. "What do you want now, Talon?" Talon tilted his head slightly, his red eyes narrowing. "What do I want? I want you to see reason, Callum. You've been stubborn, but I'll give you one last chance to join us." "I already told you," Callum said firmly. "I'm not joining you." Talon stepped closer, his tone hardening. "Do you think this is a game? That you can just keep refusing me? There's no one here to wake you now. No Reese, no one to save you. If you don't join us, I'll end this right here, right now." Callum swallowed hard, his throat dry, but he didn't back down. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. I'm not going to be part of your destruction." Talon's hands curled into fists, the air around him shimmering with dark energy. "Do you think you're some kind of hero? Eldrin's dead. The society is gone. You're a speck of dust in a storm you can't control. If you don't join us, you'll be nothing but a memory." Callum's chest tightened, but he held Talon's gaze. "If it means standing against you, I'll take that chance." Talon's mask tilted slightly, his frustration evident. "You're a fool," he said coldly. "Enough," Vexa said, stepping forward and placing a hand on Talon's arm. Her touch seemed to calm him, though the glow of his eyes still burned fiercely. "Let me handle this," she said softly, her voice carrying an edge of confidence. Talon hesitated, then stepped back, crossing his arms as Vexa turned her attention fully to Callum. "Callum," she began, her voice soft and alluring. "You're being so stubborn. I don't understand why." Callum's brow furrowed as Vexa closed the distance between them, her emerald eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Think about what Talon is offering," she continued, her tone dripping with honey. "Power, freedom, a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. Don't you see the potential in that?" "I see destruction," Callum said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. Vexa's lips curved into a playful smile as she reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against his arm. "Destruction? No, Callum. Creation. We're building a new world, one where people like us can thrive. You could be at the center of it all. With me." Callum froze as her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. There was something magnetic about her presence, a pull that made it hard to look away. "You don't have to do this alone," Vexa said, stepping closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper now, her breath warm against his ear. "You could have me by your side. Always." Callum's throat tightened, his thoughts a jumble of emotions. He wanted to believe in her, to trust the connection he had felt before her betrayal, but he couldn't ignore the truth. "You're trying to manipulate me," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. Vexa's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew softer, almost tender. "I'm trying to help you, Callum. I see so much potential in you, so much strength. You could be unstoppable. We could be unstoppable." Her hand lingered on his arm, her touch sending an electric shiver through him. "Join us," she murmured, her voice like a siren's song. Callum swallowed hard, his resolve wavering for a fraction of a second before he found his footing again. "No," he said firmly. "I won't do it." Vexa's smile faltered, but only slightly. She stepped back, her gaze flicking to Talon. "Well," she said, her tone cooling, "it seems our Callum still needs convincing." Talon stepped forward, his red eyes blazing. "Then we'll convince him." Talon's gaze burned into Callum's projection as he tilted his head slightly, considering his next move. Slowly he turned and walked toward the kitchen, his boots echoing ominously on the floor. Callum's eyes followed him warily. Talon opened a drawer and pulled out a long, gleaming kitchen knife. He turned it over in his hands, the blade catching the silvery glow of the astral plane. "What are you doing?" Callum asked, his voice tight. Talon didn't answer immediately. He ran his gloved fingers along the blade before turning back toward Callum, his steps deliberate and menacing. "You don't seem to understand the gravity of your situation," Talon said calmly, holding the knife up. The faint shimmer of the blade sent a chill down Callum's spine. Talon stepped closer until the knife's edge was pressed against Callum's neck. "Let me make this simple. You join the Abyssal Dominion, or I end you right here, right now." Callum's breath caught as the cold blade pressed against his skin. His heart raced, and his mind screamed for a way out. "Do you really think threats will change my mind?" Callum asked, his voice trembling but resolute. Talon's eyes narrowed, and he applied the slightest bit of pressure with the blade. I don't need to change your mind. I just need you to realize that this is your last chance. Callum swallowed hard, his throat brushing against the blade. He closed his eyes, his mind flashing with images of Eldrin, the sanctum, and everything he had fought for. No, he said softly. I won't do it. There was silence for a moment. Then, with a sharp motion, Talon pulled the knife. Callum braced himself, his eyes still shut, expecting the pain, the end. But nothing happened. He opened his eyes slowly, his breath hitching as he saw Talon standing in the kitchen. In his hands, he held Callum's unconscious, real-world body. The knife was pressed against his throat, the blade gleaming menacingly. The sight sent a jolt of terror through Callum. His projection trembled as he realized how dire the situation had become. No one's here to save you now, Talon said, his voice low and dangerous. This is your final chance, Callum. Join us. Callum's chest tightened as he met Talon's glowing red eyes. Talon, Vexa said softly, stepping forward. Her voice was smoother now, her movements slower, deliberate. Let me talk to him. Talon's grip on the knife didn't loosen, but he stepped back slightly, allowing Vexa to approach Callum's projection. Vexa leaned in close, her emerald eyes shimmering with an unsettling mix of charm and desperation. Callum? She said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why fight when you can be part of something greater? Callum shook his head, his voice cracking. Because it's wrong. Vexa placed her hand gently on his arm, her touch sending a shiver through him. It doesn't have to be wrong. It can be us. Her voice was honeyed, her gaze piercing. We could do so much together. Be so much together. Vexa, stop, Callum said, his voice shaking with frustration and sadness. Why? She asked, stepping closer. Her lips curled into a soft smile, and for a moment, Callum felt the same magnetic pull he had always felt around her. You felt it, didn't you? That connection between us? It's real, Callum. It could be everything. Callum clenched his fists, fighting the wave of emotion threatening to drown him. It's not real, Vexa. Not anymore. You made your choice. Vexa's smile faltered, but she quickly masked it, stepping back as Talon moved forward again. Well, Talon said, his voice colder than ever. I suppose that's your answer. Callum met Talon's gaze, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I'll never join you. Talon stared at him for a long moment, his grip tightening on the knife. So be it. With a swift motion, Talon ran the blade across the neck of Callum's real-world body. Callum's projection gasped, his form flickering violently as pain and darkness consumed him. His last vision was of Vexa's face, her expression unreadable as everything faded to black. Callum's projection flickered violently as the final moments of his life unraveled. His form shimmered, the silver glow dimming until it vanished completely, dissolving into the void like a faint wisp of smoke. The Abyssal Dominions stood in eerie silence for a moment, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and cold indifference. Talon turned the knife in his hand, its edge still gleaming as he surveyed the room. It's done, Talon said, his voice calm and final. The last remaining link to Eldrin and his outdated ideals is gone. The former society members exchanged glances, their faces betraying a mix of emotions, some resolute, others uncertain. What about Reese? Freya asked, breaking the silence. Her tone was sharp, tinged with worry. He's still out there. Talon let out a low chuckle, his glowing red eyes narrowing behind the mask. Reese. He turned slightly, addressing the group with a dismissive wave. Reese is no threat. He's weak, a coward. His projection skills are laughable at best, and his anxiety will destroy him long before we need to lift a finger. But he's resourceful, Xana chimed in, her brow furrowing. If he... Talon cut her off with a sharp look. If Rhys tries anything, he'll fail. We have nothing to fear from him. He's already lost. The room fell silent again, the members of the Dominion nodding in reluctant agreement. "Let's go," Talon said, gesturing toward the door. "We have work to do. Humanity won't bow to us overnight." The Abyssal Dominion filed out of the apartment, their movements precise and disciplined. Talon lingered for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the space one last time before stepping into the hallway. The sound of their footsteps faded, leaving the apartment eerily quiet. Callum's lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, the faint moonlight casting long shadows across the room. The stillness was absolute, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Then, without warning, Callum's body began to shimmer faintly. The edges of his form flickered, dissolving slowly, like ash carried away on a breeze. Piece by piece, his body dissipated into nothingness, vanishing as completely as his projection had moments before. The room was left empty, as though he had never been there at all. The hum of the bus engine filled the air as Rhys sat in one of the back seats, his body tense and his hands fidgeting restlessly in his lap. The faint glow of passing streetlights flickered across his face, illuminating his anxious expression. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the window, scanning the dark streets outside as though he expected to see shadows moving in pursuit. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest, his knee bouncing as his thoughts spiraled. What if they find us? What if Callum's plan didn't work? His breathing quickened, and he forced himself to look down at his hands, pressing them together to steady himself. Then, out of nowhere, the person sitting next to him gasped loudly, jolting upright as though coming back to life. Rhys whipped his head around, his eyes wide. "Callum?" Callum turned toward him, his chest rising and falling as though he had just surfaced from a deep dive. His face was pale but determined, his expression calm despite the intensity of what had just happened. "Did it work?" Rhys asked, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. Callum leaned back in his seat, taking a moment to catch his breath. "Yeah," he said finally. "It worked." Rhys's jaw dropped, his eyes filled with awe. You actually did it." Callum gave a small nod, his lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. Rhys shook his head in disbelief. "Callum, that was insane. You're... I can't believe you pulled it off." After Callum left the Copper Hearth Bistro, Rhys caught up to him just outside the restaurant. His steps hurried, and his face filled with concern. "Callum," Rhys said, grabbing his arm to stop him. Callum turned, surprised. "What's up?" Rhys hesitated, glancing around as though someone might overhear them. "I've been thinking, what if they come for us tonight? What if they know what we're planning?" Callum's brow furrowed. "You think they'll act that fast?" "I don't know," Rhys admitted, his voice trembling. "But I can't shake the feeling that we're not safe here. There's a bus leaving for California tonight. We could be gone before they even realize what happened." Callum thought for a moment, his gaze distant. "You might be right," he said finally. "But if they do come for us, we need to be ready." Rhys frowned, his anxiety spiking. "What do you mean? How can we possibly be ready for that?" Callum's jaw tightened as an idea began to form in his mind. "I have something in mind, but I don't know if it'll work. It's risky." "Risky?" Rhys asked, his eyes widening. Callum placed a hand on his shoulder. "Trust me. Meet me at the bus station at 7 tonight. Don't ask questions, just be there." Rhys hesitated, the fear in his chest warring with the trust he had in Callum. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." 7 back on the bus, the tension between Callum and Rhys was palpable. Rhys couldn't stop glancing at Callum, his mind racing with questions. The faint rumble of the bus engine and the occasional chatter of other passengers filled the air, but Reese's focus remained fixed on his friend. After a few moments of silence, he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Callum, what exactly did you do back there? I mean, I saw you gasping for air like you just came back from the dead. What happened?" Callum turned his head, his expression calm but tired. "It was a gamble," he admitted. "I wasn't sure it would work, but it was the only way to make sure they wouldn't keep coming after us." Reese frowned. "What do you mean?" Callum took a deep breath and leaned closer, his voice steady but quiet. "I pulled off a double projection." Reese blinked, confused. "A double projection?" Callum nodded. "It's when you project yourself twice in the same dream cycle. It's incredibly risky because I wasn't sure if it would work. I just thought of it this afternoon and easily could just be a dead body sitting in this seat now, but I didn't have a choice." Reese stared at him, still not fully understanding. "Okay, but how does that explain what happened? Walk me through it." Callum nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was listening before continuing. "When I told you to meet me at the bus station, I got on the bus early, just about an hour before you got here. I fell asleep right here in this seat, and that's when I started projecting. It was my first projection. I went back to the apartment and made it look like I was packing. I knew Talon and the Abyssal Dominion might show up, so I needed to make it convincing, like I wasn't expecting them." Reese leaned back in his seat, his jaw dropping. You knew they'd try something?" "I suspected," Callum said, his tone grim. "When they showed up, I acted as though I thought they'd found me for real. I let them do what they were planning, spike my water with melatonin. I even made my projection collapse like I'd actually fallen asleep." Reese's brow furrowed. "And that's when you created the second projection?" "Exactly," Callum said. "When my first projection fell asleep, I projected again, creating a second version of myself that stayed in the dream world. I watched everything unfold, their threats, their attempts to manipulate me, even their execution." Reese shuddered. "That must have been terrifying." Callum nodded slowly. "It was. But I knew I had to sell it. If they thought they'd killed me, they'd stop hunting us. Talon's arrogance worked in our favor. He's so focused on his plans that he'd believe he'd eliminated the only threat to them." "So when your projection vanished?" "I dissolved it on purpose," Callum explained. "It was part of the act. I made it look like both my projection and my real body had been destroyed." Reese let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. "You pulled all of that off while they were right there? That's insane. But also I thought that when you die in your projection, you die in real life. A projection can only be killed by things conjured in the projected world," Callum explained. "Talon tried to kill me with my kitchen knife." "Brilliant!" Reese shouted. "It was the only way," Callum said, his voice quiet. "If they thought I was still alive, they'd keep coming. But now they'll focus on their rebellion, not us. At least not for now." Reese ran a hand through his hair, still trying to wrap his head around it. "You're either a genius or completely out of your mind. Probably both." Callum chuckled softly, though the tension in his voice was clear. "Let's hope it buys us enough time to get to Mount Shasta and figure out our next move." Reese nodded, his hands gripping the armrests tightly. "Yeah, let's hope." The bus hummed softly as it rolled through the quiet expanse of the countryside, its headlights cutting through the inky darkness of the night. Inside, the passengers were a mix of weary travelers and restless souls, their murmurs and occasional snores blending with the rhythm of the tires on the road. Callum sat by the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The faint glow of the moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the landscape. He traced the edges of his reflection in the glass, his thoughts far away. Beside him, Reese fidgeted with a loose thread on his sleeve, his knee bouncing anxiously. Despite everything, there was a sense of calm between them, a fragile truce with the chaos they had just escaped. For now, they were safe. "Do you think it'll be enough?" Reese asked quietly, breaking the silence. Callum turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know, but it's the best chance we have." Reese nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to his hands. "Mount Shasta. I hope it's everything I read about." "It'll be more," Callum said, his voice steady. "We'll figure this out, Reese. Together." Reese gave a small, hesitant smile. "Yeah, together." The two lapsed into silence again, their thoughts too heavy for words. Outside, the scenery shifted from open fields to dense woods, the towering trees casting long, ghostly shadows across the road. The bus carried them onward, its steady pace a reminder that time hadn't stopped, even though their lives had changed forever. Callum rested his head against the cool glass, his eyes half closed. The weight of everything that had happened pressed on him, but so did the spark of something else. Hope. Eldrin's teachings, the sanctum, the society. They weren't gone. Not completely. He would carry them forward. From a distance, the bus was a small beacon of light against the vast darkness, its taillights glowing faintly as it disappeared into the horizon. Inside, two unlikely companions sat side by side, their burdens heavy but their resolve unbroken. The night stretched on, vast and uncertain, but somewhere in the distance lay the promise of a new dawn, and with it, the hope of a better tomorrow.
So that is going to do it for today. I hope that you guys did enjoy. If you did, be sure to click that like button, hit that subscribe button. This story is coming to a close, but we have so much more to offer. I hope that you truly did enjoy my story, Astral. It's crazy to me because when I started this writing Astral, I just had a very basic idea for the beginning, and then I knew kind of like what I wanted to happen at the end, but I had no idea about what I was going to do in the middle. I didn't have a hint of doing the Society, the Abysmal Dominion, Eldrin, just all of the incredible things that happened and made this story so much fun. It just kind of, once I started writing, coming up with it, that's what it ended up becoming. I was so happy with it because it's a story that I kind of always wanted to write, something along the lines of creating a whole new like world, even though it's like the world that we live in, it's still like a whole nother realm to the world we live in. And so it was a lot of fun to write, but obviously we're not done with Astral just yet, but we're gonna have to wait a while to see what Callum and Reese get up to next. We will be back next Friday. However, it is the 5th Friday of the month, so it's kind of one of those weird Fridays where it's an extra Friday in the month. It happens like once a quarter. There won't be a new story next week, but there will be a new video. But if you watched all 8 parts of Astral, then there's not really a need unless you just want to show love, support. Come on in, click the like button, stick around for a minute. But other than that, it will be the entire story of Astral, which will be, I think, a pretty decently long video. But it'll be the full story with all 8 chapters put together. So like I said, if you've watched the first 8 parts, there won't be anything really new in there. But we will be back 2 Fridays from now with a brand new story. And I'd love for you guys to come and join us then. But that will do it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Click that like button, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for spending a little bit of your Friday and your last 8 Fridays here with me.